Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and today we are taking a look at the 2019 MacBook Air. Now, in terms of updates, this is a pretty minor update. Apple went ahead and basically gave us the same computer with an updated True Tone display, and now that the MacBook Air has a software update, it can also go up to 400 nits of brightness, but if you have the old 2018 MacBook Air, they already patched that in. But another big update coming to this laptop is also the new keyboard. So the previous MacBook Air, the 2018 version, had a third generation butterfly keyboard, and apparently that didn't fully fix the problem, so Apple went ahead and revised the materials, and hopefully this MacBook Air should have a keyboard that doesn't experience any of those stuck or repeating keys. The biggest improvement to this MacBook Air has actually nothing to do with the hardware, and that is because it also received a price drop. When it debuted 7 months ago with the Retina Display, it had a price point of $1,199. Apple went ahead and lowered that down by $100, so now it retails for $1,099. But more importantly, if you are a college student, you can go on Apple's website and get this for $999, which is the price that the old MacBook Air debuted at. So now we have a Retina MacBook Air for students, which is probably a pretty big target audience for Apple, debuting at $999. But enough about that. You guys want to see this in action, so let's go ahead and unbox it first. Okay, and here's the MacBook Air box. As you can see, we have the gold color of the MacBook Air. Interestingly enough, this is the only MacBook that you can get in this nice gold color. The other MacBook Pros only come in space gray or silver. And you can see that on the side of the box, we have that nice MacBook Air branding. So let's go ahead and rip open the plastic. So let's go ahead and lift up the lid of the box. And you can see we are greeted with the gold MacBook Air. Let's go ahead and lift that up and see what else we have in here. Of course, we have a USB-C to USB-C connection. The MacBook Air only has 2 Thunderbolt 3 USB-C ports, so if you want other ports, unfortunately, there are none there. Of course, we got our pamphlet with all of the cool Apple stuff in it. Now, I believe the MacBook Air comes with color matching Apple stickers, and yep, there you can see if you want a gold pair of Apple stickers, you'll have to order a gold MacBook Air. Of course, we also have a USB-C power adapter inside of here, and the wattage on this is going to be 30 watts. And here we have it, the 2019 gold MacBook Air. Let's go ahead and rip open this plastic. Now this gold is a little bit of a combination between the old gold color and the rose gold color. Kind of looks pinkish in certain lighting situations. Again, you can only get this color on a MacBook if you get the MacBook Air. Now I got the 256 gigabyte configuration of this model, so that's gonna retail for $1,299, but the MacBook Air comes in as low as $1,099. You can see on the side of the device, we have 2 Thunderbolt 3 USB-C ports, and on the other side of the device, we have a headphone jack. So it's only gonna have 2 ports there. If you're thinking it's gonna have 4 ports like some of the MacBook Pros, unfortunately, it does not. In fact, let's grab that entry-level MacBook Pro we unboxed the other day and see just how different these 2 devices are. So as you can see, they look pretty similar at first glance, but of course, the MacBook Air has this tapered edge that goes along the device, so it looks a little bit slimmer when you start going more towards the bottom of the device, but it's overall around the same footprint. It's a very minor difference in weight, but you can notice it as you're holding both of them in your hands. Let me power it on, set it up, and then I will get back to you. So one of the major updates to this MacBook Air is that it now comes with a True Tone display. The 2018 version came with a Retina display. Now Apple's adding a little bit more with that True Tone color. If you don't know what the True Tone display is, it basically changes the color temperature of your screen based on the ambient lighting around you. It's a nice addition, and I personally like the True Tone display a lot. I find it really helps, especially when you're reading text on white backgrounds, especially when you're browsing websites, but it's not a must-have upgrade if you have a 2018 MacBook Air. Now, last year's MacBook Air, when it came out, had 300 nits of brightness. Apparently that was a bug, and Apple enabled a software update to bring that screen brightness all the way up to 400 nits. The entry-level MacBook Pro can achieve even higher brightness, going up to 500 nits of brightness. However, I didn't find that the brightness was a problem on last year's MacBook Air. It works fine in most lighting environments, and especially if you're using your computer indoors, you're really not gonna notice the difference. So the big change to last year's MacBook Air was that it came with a Retina display, and this 2019 version obviously comes with that too. It's still a good looking display. However, it does lack the P3 wide color spectrum, which the entry-level 13-inch 2019 MacBook Pro does have. Despite not having the extra P3 wide color gamut, it is still a nice looking and color accurate display, but if you do put it side by side with a MacBook Pro, you will notice the difference. Another change to this MacBook Air comes in the form of the butterfly keyboard. So when this MacBook Air launched in 2018, it had the 3rd generation butterfly keyboard, which made the keys quieter and also had a protective layer to prevent debris from entering the keyboard. However, that didn't completely solve the problem of stuck or repeating keys on the butterfly keyboard. So this time, Apple added some new materials to the keyboard that they say should fix that issue. And it's way too early to tell if this 4th generation butterfly keyboard has completely fixed the issue. But for now, I haven't heard any instances of this keyboard being broken. So hopefully it is fixed. If it isn't fixed, Apple is also implementing a replacement program, even with this computer being brand new. So if you experience any keyboard issues for the next 4 years, Apple will replace it completely for free. As for the keys themselves, they type very similar to the 3rd generation butterfly keyboard. They have the quieter typing sound, and they still have that low travel, which some people like and some people don't like. Unlike the update to the entry-level MacBook Pro, the MacBook Air still retains the function keys, so still no touch bar on the MacBook Air model. However, you still get the very convenient Touch ID sensor for unlocking your computer. Okay, now that we opened up the MacBook Air, let's take a look at some benchmarks. So let's open up our favorite benchmarking tool, Geekbench. And as you can see, we're getting around the same score as the 2018 MacBook Air because it has the same exact processor inside of it, so that makes a lot of sense. If you compare this score to the entry-level MacBook Pro we scored yesterday, you can see that you're getting a much better multi-core score with that 4-core processor. You're getting around 16,800 on the MacBook Pro, where the MacBook Air is around 7,000. So you're getting more than double the performance going from the Air to that entry-level 13-inch Pro. Let's also take a second to look at the disk read and write speeds. So as we use the Blackmagic Design disk speed test, you can see we're getting around a 677 on the megabytes for write and a 1,259 on the read speed. So let's really test out the CPU by opening Cinebench R20. This is a much more intensive benchmark than the Geekbench Benchmark. So obviously I'm speeding this part of the video up, but I had to wait a very, very long time for the Cinebench Benchmark to complete. It was a very night and day difference going from the entry-level 2019 MacBook Pro to this 2019 MacBook Air. It took a very long time for this to complete. And towards the end of this MacBook Air sounded like it was about to die. As we finish the benchmark, we get a CPU score of 567, almost 1,000 points lower than our entry-level MacBook Pro score from yesterday. Another difference from the entry-level MacBook Pro to this MacBook Air comes in the GPUs. This MacBook Air comes with an Intel UHD Graphics 617. That's compared to the Iris Plus 645 found on the entry-level Pro. To test out the GPU power, I opened up the Heaven benchmark, and as I opened up the Heaven benchmark, I could see that it was running around 15 frames per second, and sometimes it would go above that, and sometimes it would dip even lower than that. As we finish the Heaven benchmark, you can see that our FPS was around 15. It was 14.6. Our score was only 369 with a minimum FPS of 6.1 and a max FPS of 25.1. If we're comparing that to the entry-level MacBook Pro again, and I keep bringing that up because a lot of people are going to be comparing these computers, that MacBook Pro scored almost double on the graphics performance with that benchmark. So as you're watching this video, as you're seeing these benchmark scores come in, you're probably thinking in your head, well, why wouldn't I spend $200 extra to go for the 13-inch MacBook Pro? It's outperforming it in almost every single way, and the MacBook Air isn't that much lighter than the 13-inch MacBook Pro, so should I even bother considering the Air? So here's the thing. This is where the benchmarking and real-world usage comes into this. So obviously that 13-inch MacBook Pro, if you're doing any sort of professional work, you're probably going to benefit going to that computer. However, if you are only using your laptop to browse the web, watch YouTube, do light tasks that aren't going to be processor or GPU intensive, there are some advantages going with this machine. For example, this is using a much lower power processor. So while the 13-inch MacBook Pros were notorious for getting a little bit hot, especially when it's under stress, this MacBook Air runs cooler to the touch. Aside from it being overall cooler when running, I also noticed that you couldn't hear the fan as loud as you could when running the MacBook Pro, even when you're doing some day-to-day tasks. Yes, if you load up an intensive application, this MacBook Air will get just as loud as the MacBook Pro, but for everyday tasks, I find that it runs quieter. Another thing you want to consider is that this has a starting price of $1,099, while the entry-level MacBook Pro has a starting price of $1,299. A $200 difference isn't that major, but here's what you should consider. When you're saving that extra $200 on the MacBook Air, you can use that extra money to upgrade things like the storage. So instead of getting the MacBook Pro with 128 gigabytes, you can spend the same amount of money and get 256 gigabytes. Now, obviously, I haven't had enough time to test the battery life on the 2019 version, but it seems like it's going to be about the same as the 2018 version, unless there was some drastic change inside, which it doesn't really look like there was. But another advantage for going with this MacBook Air over that entry-level MacBook Pro is that you're going to be getting around an additional 2 hours of battery life. Now, for some people, a machine that runs quieter, runs cooler, has 2 hours longer in battery life, that is something they're going to prefer, especially if you're just doing those day-to-day tasks. You're not editing video, you're not editing a bunch of photos, you don't need to run any games or do anything graphically intensive. That's probably the person who should be picking up this MacBook Air over that entry-level MacBook Pro. If you're not going to be pegging that CPU, you'll probably enjoy using this machine a lot more. Anyway, these are just my initial impressions of the 2019 MacBook Air. Obviously, I have to spend a lot more time with this computer before I can give it a solid recommendation. So if you have any questions for a future review, be sure to leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, make sure you give me a like. If you want to see more from my channel, including a future, more in-depth review of this MacBook Air, make sure you're subscribed. And as always, I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.